It's the last full day of summer 2022. It was dry at times, been some heavy rains lately. Plenty of clear days for going on these adventures, so I'm thankful for that. Didn't have to wait for a clear day when I had the time to go on an adventure. I had the weather to do it. And I got some asters here blooming, some goldenrod. We're on the spillway of the Tully Lake here in north central Massachusetts. I believe this is Franklin County here, eastern Franklin County, just north of the town of Athol, Massachusetts. And the Tully Lake was built in the 1940s to address the problem of flooding on the Millers River and downstream on the Connecticut River. And as often the case, these lands that are designated for flood control often get used for recreation as well. There's a campground here and several trails, even a disc golf course right down below the dam here. And several waterfalls that flow into either directly into this lake or onto on the feeder streams to this lake. And there's also a very scenic, fairly short hike with a nice viewpoint right across the road here. You can see those ledges of Tully Mountain. And all these points of interest are connected by the 22-mile Tully Trail. We're not going to do the whole 22 miles today. Maybe about a third of that at the most. But going to try to visit the more scenic spots along the Tully Trail, which goes around Tully Lake and a large area north and west of that as well. Let's go across the street here and take a look at the view of Tully Mountain. Massachusetts Highway 32 connects the points of interest around here. It runs north-south across the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from the Connecticut border north to New Hampshire. We're not far from New Hampshire here. We might even be able to see it from these ledges up here. So I'm walking across the spillway of the Tully Dam, and the Tully River has been straightened and diverted from its original course during the construction of this flood control project. So it's more of a straight shot right here, but looks interesting. And just to the west of here, a few miles, are the cliffs and overlooks of Tully Mountain, which is about 600 feet higher than the surrounding land and about 1,100 feet in elevation. We're going to park right near that and do about a 2 or 3 mile loop in that area this morning, and then head back over this area and try to catch some of the water coming over the falls. And before we head over to Tully Mountain here, let's take a quick look at the map on the kiosk here. I didn't try to print this off because it's such a large area. I don't think it would have been readable on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And there weren't any available here. So we'll just take a look at this, and I've got it downloaded on my tablet for navigation purposes. Not always easy to get cell phone service in these areas, so if you're depending on All Trails or any of the other apps, you need to make sure you download your maps before you start hiking. I've learned that the hard way a few times. So we're right where the number 1 is, the west side of Tully Lake. And number 4 is a falls, Doane's Falls. Number 7 is a falls, Spirit Falls. And way up north on the Tully Trail here, number 9 is Royalston Falls. Don't think I'll get up there today. And just to the west of our current location, number 10 on the map, is Tully Mountain. And I believe the parking lot's on the east side of that. And this is all connected by the 22-mile Tully Trail, which is shown in yellow here, with the blue dots along the way. And there's several other trails that are shown on this map as well. So let's just take a short drive over to the base of Tully Mountain and see what we can find on the way up. And I chose to ascend Tully Mountain on the Tully Trail itself from the west. The Tully Trail crosses Tully Road on the west side of Tully Mountain, right near the west branch of the Tully River. There's a little bridge there. Limited roadside parking, but this is a weekday and I had no trouble getting a spot. I was the only one in that area parking. I could see it being an issue on a busy day. The park map shows an official parking area on the east side of this mountain. I'll go look at that in a minute. But we're at the boundary of the wildlife management area. And there was a selective logging and a clear-cut logging just as you approach this. But our Tully Trail is marked quite clearly with these yellow blazes. There's also a few blue arrows where needed to direct you which way to go. So if you choose to retrace my steps today, I was able to gain roadside parking along what's called Tully Warwick Road on the west side of Tully Mountain itself. I was just trying to get a few more miles in and see some things that other people haven't seen when they do the loop from the east side on that purple blaze trail, or the trail that's marked in purple. We'll see what color those blazes are when we get there. But I came in, I parked right by the bridge there, across the Tully River, came up the northwest side of this mountain on a level logging road that had occasional yellow blazes, and then where needed there was a yellow blaze directing me southeast and south up the northwest slope of Tully Mountain. I'm right about where it goes from white to dark green, and we're out of the logging purchase. As far as I can tell, we're leaving that right now and going to be heading up into, we'll see if it's mature woods. I think there was a fire up here a few years ago. I don't know which side of the mountain burned. I don't know how much of it burned, but I read there was a fire on this mountain in 2020. So let's keep hiking up. We'll see what there is to see, and we'll certainly get a great view when we get to the top. And I do believe we're out of that logging area. And I wouldn't say this is mature woods, but there's evidence that it was either burned or cleared for other reasons in the past, and that's all these decaying birch trees. I believe this is mostly paper birch here. There may have been some gray birch in here too. This looks like mostly paper birch that is laid down and fallen down, and the paper birch is a tree that doesn't live that long. If it can get full sun and stay in full sun, they can get quite large, but usually they get shaded out by the other trees, and down they come at a relatively young age. So does the gray birch. And here's a paper birch that's still alive, and is about a foot in diameter, and trying to keep up with these other trees. Plenty of information on birch trees on my other channel. The channel's called Barkin. Up the right tree, that's B-A-R-K-I-N apostrophe. Up the right tree. I did a 3-part series on birch trees this spring. It's called the Spring Birch Study. And we looked at them before and during leaf out and after leaf out. And I covered 4 of the common species of birches found in the New England area and the Appalachian Mountains and parts of the Ohio Valley. Let's keep hiking up. There's plenty of hemlock here. It doesn't look too diseased. It's certainly not dead. And woolly adelgid is a problem. The further north you go and the colder it gets, the less of a problem it is as far as killing the trees. But it still can be a problem as far as the overall health of the trees. You can tell you're in heavy woolly adelgid damage areas just by the lack of shade under these hemlock trees. If you get in healthy hemlock forest, there's almost no sun getting through in a healthy hemlock forest. This looks like there's some damage here. Most of these hemlock trees probably came in after the birches, so they're still growing. And that last boulder was a good 20 feet high. Had a fresh break in it where we could see the grain of the boulder. I didn't really look up the geology of this area in detail, but it's mostly metamorphic rocks that were once sedimentary rocks, but there's some bubbles of igneous rock that have poked up through as well. So, but sitting on one of these smaller boulders here is a red eft. Let's take a look at him. He must have heard me coming. He's taking off at full speed for a red eft. Got those little red dots on the back. And then an orangish red color as well. Well, you don't have to blend in when you're toxic. And from what I've read in the past, these animals are toxic. Nobody really wants to eat them. The birds don't want to eat them. So they can just stick right out and be seen. Makes it easier for us not to accidentally step on them when we're hiking. There's a lot of salamanders spend most of their time under logs and hidden, but when they do come out, they blend in very well. Often after rainy spells, they come out in the spring. But this guy's out for a little walk. He'll be looking for a wetland to become a mature newt. So they're called newts when they're in the water. They still keep those little red dots on their back, but they turn more of an olive green color when they're in the water. And they lay their eggs to finish their life cycle. But as an adolescent, they live in the woods and crawl around and look for things to eat and try to hide from people making videos. So here you go, buddy. He sure is interesting looking. They're pretty common in the Appalachian Mountains south of here. I don't know how far north you find them. I know hiking in Pennsylvania, you see them all the time, especially when the leaves are wet and they can get out and not dry out too much. So heavy rains the last few days. The leaves are still damp. The air is fairly cool. He can make his way around here without drying out too much. There's another one right here. So we'll be on the lookout for these. I didn't see any in that area that had been logged. Wouldn't expect to either, but they are very common in the forest, and you know, they're probably more common than we realize, but often don't come out during the heat of summer when the air is dry and the leaves are dry. Look at those spots on the back. Boy, they're almost iridescent. So we'll probably see a few more if I keep my eyes open. They're easy to spot and interesting animals. And yes, these red efts are amphibians. And amphibians like to keep their skin moist. And you know what? I did a hike in May during the first really warm week of the spring, and it was actually summer-like temperatures that day. And every garter snake at Bigelow Hollow and Breakneck Pond, which is on this channel, that hike is, was out trying to make a living because it was their first chance to do so in months. And I'm suspecting that that's why I'm seeing dozens of these red efts all of a sudden. Because like I mentioned at the start of this video, most of this summer was quite dry. And even with some rains, it takes a while for the leaf litter to really moisten up. Several good rain events, but I've seen at least a dozen since that first recording just a couple minutes ago. Again, they don't blend in, they stick right out, but there's enough of them here. I need to watch what I'm doing. I don't want to step on one of these guys. Most of these aren't more than 2 inches long. They can get bigger, and when they're in the newt form, they get bigger than that as well. In usually shallow wetlands, you find them along lake shores. They get 4 or 5 inches long. There you go, buddy. But all kinds of them here. I mean, I've seen at least a dozen. So again, after a real wet or dry summer with hot temperatures at times, they were probably laying low. And now they're out looking for the things that they like to eat. I'm not that sure of their diet, but I think they're pretty much looking for insects. And don't know if they eat any vegetation. I don't believe they do. But we'll keep our eye out for them. There's all kinds of them out here. So this is their opportunity. Mother Nature said it's go time, and go they do. And the same I found that day with all those garter snakes. That day I hiked, I was out there for 7 or 8 hours, I saw at least 8 or 10 garter snakes, and I don't think I even saw that many people. And after a little over a mile, probably not more than a half-hour hiking time, on the north and west face of Tully Mountain on the Tully Trail itself, which is the 22-mile loop trail, we're going to trade the yellow blazes for blue blazes, and that's a shorter loop that ascends Tully Mountain from the east side. And yes, I stopped counting at about 40. And there's probably 40 more since I stopped counting on these little red F's. And boy, you can really see that iridescent orange color on his back there. What I'd like to do, this blue trail makes a loop. It ascends and descends the south-facing slope, which is very steep and rocky. I'm going to do my knees a favor. I'm going to loop back down the mountain. I'm going to hold off on the view. The view is right up here to my right. We're going to turn left, go back down the east side of the mountain, and loop around and come up the south face, which is steeper and rockier and probably easier on my knees to go up that than down it. And then we'll take a look at the view and anything else we can find. And after turning left on the Blue Blaze Trail, that was an old wagon road or wood road that descended gradually down the east face of Tully Mountain. Wrapped around to where there's a parking lot for probably 20 or 30 cars. And then the yellow trail intersects the blue trail again at that parking lot and descends moderately steeply up the south face of Tully Mountain here. Becomes more open and rocky as you come up here. And we're starting to get some good views here. And we'll start panning around from the south, around the east side of this view. The lake in the foreground here has houses around it. I believe it is man-made. I saw a small dam at the west end of it. And then the flood control lake where we started this adventure a few hours ago. It's kind of tucked away between the pines over in that valley there. That's where we'll be heading in a couple hours here to explore some of the falls over there. And based on the soil moisture and rainfall reports and stream levels of this area, I believe we're going to get a nice view of Doane's Falls and possibly Spirit Falls as well. I'm expecting water to be coming across them. And as we go further into New Hampshire here, we're looking at some of the smaller mountains in southern New Hampshire here. I did some hikes up a lot of these mountains a few weeks ago, actually a couple months ago. And there's one called North Packmanodnock Mountain over in this general direction. That's on this channel. I did a hike up what's called Kidder Mountain, which is in this general area as well in your field of view. I did my part 3 of the spring birch study on Kidder Mountain back in early June when the leaf out was complete. And the granddaddy of all the mountains in this area, almost in the clouds today at 3,100 feet. 3 times as high as where we're standing right now is Mount Monadnock. And had a good weather in mid-August to get up there and do a tree study for about 6 hours on the face of the mountain that we're seeing right now, the south side of Mount Monadnock. I was up there about 6-7 hours recording the trees that are on those trails on that side of the mountain. And I also looked at a lot of the scenery on top of the mountain, which is completely bare of any trees. And that tree study of Mount Monadnock is on my other channel called Barking Up the Right Tree is that channel. And the video is called Trees of Mount Monadnock, New Hampshire. And I retraced my steps down the northwest side of Tully Mountain. Saw plenty more of those red F's. And drove about 4 or 5 miles east of there over to the inlet to the Tully Lake impoundment, which is a flood control lake. There's also a Tully Lake here that isn't flood control. I think it says Tully Pond, but could be confused. Right down the street from the campground, there's a canoe launch. And this is the main fork of the Tully River coming in here. I think at higher lake levels, this would still be lake, but it does have a current here. So the lake is down a few feet and the water is flowing into it at this lake level. And if the lake were a little higher, you could probably paddle right up this without a current. But I think this could be paddled today. I didn't bring the boat today, didn't have the time to try to do both. But this would certainly be an interesting upstream canoe paddle. There's a nice natural wetland up there called Long Pond, and it looks like it's paddleable even further up from there. But what we're going to do is follow this shoreline here downstream just a few hundred feet and turn up a major tributary. It's called Lawrence Brook. It starts about 25-30 miles north of here, right near Mount Monadnock, and flows south. And there isn't a gauge on that, but there's a gauge on a stream right near it that was reading pretty high this morning, so I'm assuming that the Lawrence Brook will have plenty of water coming over Doane's Falls for us to look at. And just a short distance from that boat launch, Lawrence Brook empties into the Tully Lake. And this is the brook right here. It's got plenty of water. I'm sure the falls are going to be real interesting. And it flows westward into the lake here, and right across the lake is a campground. You could probably paddle over here close to the mouth of this Lawrence Brook, and then there's plenty of fisherman trails leading up to the falls. So these unofficial trails sometimes lead to some of the more interesting scenes I have found in my time. You know, the main trails are fine, but these lesser used fisherman trails can lead to some neat scenery as well. You're certainly getting some pretty daylight. The sun angle is a lot lower this time of year. Doesn't overexpose your subject like it can in the summer. So this is Lawrence Brook. Plenty of water. There's several sets of falls upstream from here. We're just going to follow what trails exist here and see what there is to see for about the next hour or so. Now I'm going to guess this lower falls has several flumes here, probably at least 80 feet of drop. I think the total drop for this ravine for all the falls is over 200 feet. So this is quite a show when we pick the right time to do it. With heavy rain the last couple days, we've got quite the show here. I'm going to get a little closer in just a minute here, but we've got a main flume right here, probably 25-30 feet high, and just above it another one just as tall. Boy, and you sure can see the mist being sprayed up by this pretty high volume of water today. And I'm going to guess the falls here on this lower segment are about 25 feet. There's a nice deep pool here. I'm sure there's some trout hanging out down there. And just a great neat feel here. It's nice and green. And with this late summer sun, it's just a wonderful place to spend the afternoon. And the sound of rushing water continues above the middle and upper falls. I recorded those without commentary. After exploring the lower falls, there is a trail. I was on a fisherman trail, and I got on the White Blaze trail to get to the middle and upper falls at that point, and continued on that trail. Recorded those falls from the trail, and then crossed the road. And there's a wagon road that's shown on the map here that goes to a place called Codding's Meadow. I'm not going to get back that far. I'm going to have to turn around in a minute. I'm just going to review what I did in the last 6.5 hours. And plan on coming back here to see more of this area. And there's the Lawrence Brook above the falls here. Plenty of mill remains in this area, several sets of them. There's an old grindstone they have on display. So these falls were put to work by more than one person. And this old wagon road is now on this. We're now on the south side of Lawrence Brook. We crossed it on that Stone Arch Bridge, and this does go back to the Codding's Meadow, which is a flat water area with wide channels where you can take a canoe or kayak. I didn't look into where you access that. I don't know if you have to carry your boat all the way down this wagon road here, or if there's another place to access it, but it's supposed to be really pretty. Just going to review what I did all day today. Started this morning on the west side of Tully Mountain, where the Tully Warwick Road crosses the west branch of the Tully River. Some roadside parking there. Took the trail that's yellow blazed but shown in red here. Zigzagged through the logged area, which was passable. It was not overgrown. And came right out to near the summit, where it's showing a purple trail, which is actually blue blazed. I followed that clockwise around to the parking lot and then ascended back up Tully Mountain from that direction to the viewpoint. And then proceeded to retrace my steps down the northwest face of that mountain. You could do that in 2 hours easily. I was up there longer making videos and looking around. Proceeded to come over here on some county roads and numbered roads. Right over here to where the canoe launch is. It shows the symbol of a person in a kayak or a canoe there. And started exploring right around where that stream is. There was a lot of fisherman trails there. Caught my attention. Ended up at the lower falls on those fisherman trails. And then I proceeded to get on the Blaze Trail, which is shown in purple here, but has actually got white blazes that went from the lower falls to the middle falls that I recorded without commentary, and the upper falls I recorded without commentary. And based on the amount of water I saw here today, I'm sure the Spirit Falls just north of here and the Royalston Falls way up near the New Hampshire border were probably flowing well too. Those have really small watersheds, so I thought I'd try this one since it had a larger watershed and collects water from a larger area. But I have a feeling those are probably running good today and be well worth coming back to explore. You can paddle upstream from that canoe launch several miles and actually could access Spirit Falls by canoe and by hiking trail. So that would certainly be a trip I'd be interested in considering in the future.